It was a sweltering afternoon in July when Karen first sensed something was terribly wrong. She had spent weeks planning a modest family vacation, a cozy cabin retreat in the nearby countryside, to finally reconnect with her grown children, Melissa and Daniel, who she hadn't seen much lately. Karen, at 59, cherished nothing more than bringing her small family together, even if it meant carefully counting every penny of her modest pension. Her daughter Melissa had enthusiastically supported the idea, suggesting activities and creating an itinerary. Daniel had been reluctant, as always, but even he eventually agreed. Everything seemed perfectly arranged, until the day Karen had to break the news. Her voice cracked slightly over the phone as she explained to Melissa that finances were simply too tight to cover the trip. The disappointment in Melissa's voice stung deeply. But Melissa had a strange feeling. Her mother, though far from wealthy, had never canceled anything so abruptly. Karen was a woman who would go without essentials just to keep a promise to her children. Suspicion took root when Melissa tried calling her mother repeatedly the following weekend, only to get no answer. Fear crept into her mind. Had something happened? Determined, Melissa drove the 40 minutes across town to Karen's house, half expecting the worst. Her fears deepened as she noticed the drawn blinds, the empty driveway, and letters piling up near the front door. Worried, Melissa fumbled through her keys, opened the door, and quickly glanced around. The silence was heavy, the air stagnant. Then she noticed something on the kitchen table, a printed travel itinerary. Melissa picked up the paper, heart pounding. The itinerary detailed a 7-day luxury vacation at a 5-star seaside resort hundreds of miles away. Private beaches, gourmet dinners, spa treatments, all booked in her mother's name. The dates overlapped exactly with the canceled family trip. Melissa's hands trembled. Anger, confusion, and betrayal twisted inside her. Why would Karen lie? She always emphasized family loyalty and honesty above all else. Unable to think clearly, Melissa took pictures of the itinerary, closed the door behind her, and drove home. She sat alone in the dark for hours, replaying her mother's words. Karen would have some explaining to do, but Melissa decided she would wait. She wanted her mother to return, blissfully unaware that she'd been discovered. Only then would Melissa confront her, making sure Karen could never brush this betrayal under the carpet. Melissa knew one thing for certain: this conversation would change everything. Melissa barely slept over the following days, her thoughts consumed by unanswered questions. Her mother's secrecy troubled her deeply. Karen had always been the glue that held the family together after Melissa's father died 10 years earlier, a kind, reliable woman who prided herself on openness. Now, Melissa questioned everything she believed about her mother. She tried distracting herself, but her mind kept returning to the itinerary she'd found: luxury suite, all-inclusive gourmet dining, spa packages. Melissa couldn't fathom Karen indulging in such extravagances, especially without mentioning a word. Something didn't add up. Driven by anxiety, she dialed her brother Daniel's number. Daniel, at 32, was younger by 3 years, and Melissa always had been fiercely protective of him. Since their father's passing, he'd become somewhat distant, often absorbed in his career. Melissa hoped Daniel would be as appalled by Karen's deception as she was. But when she shared what she'd found, he surprised her with his cool, detached reaction. "Maybe Mom just needed a break, Mel," Daniel suggested dismissively. "We shouldn't jump to conclusions." Melissa was taken aback, the heat rising in her cheeks. "Daniel, this isn't just about her needing a break. She lied straight to our faces." "Look, she's an adult," Daniel responded tersely. "We don't have the right to know everything she does. Besides, she always gave up everything for us. If she needed this vacation for herself, good for her." His reaction stung Melissa, leaving her feeling even more isolated. She had expected Daniel's support, but instead found herself utterly alone in her confusion and anger. She hung up the phone, her brother's indifference feeling like a betrayal in itself. Her bitterness deepened, and she vowed silently that no matter what Daniel thought, she would confront Karen and get the truth. Meanwhile, at the luxurious seaside resort, hundreds of miles away, Karen tried to immerse herself in relaxation, but guilt and anxiety tugged incessantly at her heart. Every luxurious moment, each meal, each massage, only reminded her of the profound deception she was committing. But her reason for the trip was one she couldn't share. Her deepest secret weighed heavy, and Karen knew the consequences of revealing it would shatter the fragile bonds holding their family together. On her third evening, after another solitary dinner overlooking a perfect sunset, Karen slowly walked the moonlit beach, reflecting on her past decisions. How had her life come to this? Tears welled in her eyes. She had lied for the first time to the very people she loved most. And for what? She wondered whether it was worth it, whether the risk she'd taken would pay off. Karen stared at the ocean waves, cold, unforgiving, reflecting how she felt inside. There was no turning back. The secret was too powerful, the stakes too high. She resolved herself to face whatever consequences awaited her at home. Soon, she'd need to explain herself to Melissa and Daniel. She owed them that much. But Karen wondered if they'd ever understand or forgive what she had done. Back home, Melissa meticulously rehearsed the confrontation, determined to catch Karen completely off guard when she returned. Every second brought her closer to the moment of reckoning, and deeper into a twisted, uncomfortable web of family secrets she could not yet fully grasp. Karen's return was met with an eerie silence, the warm homecoming she had always cherished. Melissa's cheerful greeting, Daniel's quiet hug, was replaced by an unsettling emptiness. As she stood on her doorstep, fumbling for her keys, a feeling of dread twisted deep inside her. She opened the door slowly, her suitcase rolling heavily behind her, the luxury from her vacation fading fast into anxious reality. She'd barely stepped into the living room when Melissa emerged from the kitchen doorway, eyes narrowed and mouth drawn into a tight line. "So," Melissa's voice trembled with barely restrained anger, "did you enjoy your trip?" Karen's heart dropped. She set down the suitcase, feeling utterly exposed. "Melissa, please let me explain." "Explain?" Melissa interrupted sharply, her voice rising. "Explain why you lied to us? You canceled our family vacation, claiming we couldn't afford it. Yet, you ran off to some five-star resort instead." Karen felt the floor shift beneath her feet, every word stabbing deeper into her heart. "Melissa, it wasn't what it looked like. Oh, spare me," Melissa interrupted bitterly. "Daniel doesn't care. But I deserve an explanation. We trusted you. You're the one who always said honesty mattered most in our family, remember?" Karen looked away, her eyes welling with tears. How could she possibly explain without making it worse? How could she share a truth she barely understood herself? She drew a shaky breath, searching for courage. "Please, Melissa, can we just sit down and talk calmly?" Melissa hesitated, but eventually nodded stiffly, following Karen to the couch. Karen felt exposed, vulnerable under her daughter's fierce gaze, yet knew she had no choice. She took a deep breath and began carefully, her voice quiet yet firm. "You remember your Aunt Carol? She and I weren't just sisters, we were best friends. Before she died last year, she revealed something to me that changed everything. Carol had a different life than any of us knew." Melissa's eyes widened slightly, suspicion replaced momentarily by confusion. "What does Aunt Carol have to do with this?" Karen glanced away, nervously smoothing her skirt. "She told me a family secret, something your grandmother never wanted us to know. It was about your father, and a woman he was involved with before we married." Melissa leaned forward, stunned, her expression softening slightly. Dad had an affair? No, Karen said quickly, shaking her head. It was before me. She was pregnant, Melissa. There's a child, a daughter, your half-sister. Melissa recoiled visibly, her eyes widening in shock and disbelief. How could you keep this from us? How long have you known? Karen sighed heavily, her voice breaking. Just since Aunt Carol's passing last year. I didn't know how to tell you. I wasn't sure if I ever could. Melissa swallowed hard, processing this new revelation. The silence stretched painfully between them until Melissa finally whispered, Is that why you went on vacation? To meet her? Karen nodded slowly. Yes, her name is Angela. I didn't know what to expect, but she contacted me a few months ago. She wanted to meet privately. I needed to see her to understand the past before burdening you and Daniel with it. Melissa sat back, conflicted emotions racing across her face. Anger and betrayal fought against a faint stirring of understanding. Karen's lie was no longer simply a luxury getaway. It had been a journey into a painful past. Melissa's throat tightened as she realized that her mother was also suffering, trapped by the weight of secrets too heavy to bear alone. Still, the sting of deception lingered. Melissa's voice hardened again, more out of sadness than anger. But why couldn't you just be honest? You taught us honesty mattered more than anything. Karen, eyes brimming with tears, reached tentatively toward her daughter's hand. Because I didn't know if this secret would break us apart forever. Melissa's gaze was distant, her mind swimming through memories, piecing together fragments of family history she had always accepted, without question. Now each memory held hidden layers, secrets silently affecting every moment of their lives. As they sat in silence, Karen wondered whether revealing the truth would mend their relationship or deepen the fracture. And, for Melissa, the past she had always known was shattered, replaced by questions without answers, mistrust replacing certainty. Neither mother nor daughter yet realized how much further they would need to go to fully understand the depth and complexity of their family's hidden past. Melissa sat silently on her couch later that evening, her heart heavy from the conversation with Karen. The room was dimly lit, shadows dancing across the photographs hanging on the walls, smiling images of happier times now seeming almost foreign to her. Each glance felt like looking at strangers she had mistakenly believed she knew intimately. The emotional storm within her refused to subside, cycling through disbelief, anger, pity, and sadness. She picked up her phone, staring at the screen, debating whether to call Daniel. Her brother's indifferent reaction troubled her. Did he already know more than he admitted? Or had he simply checked out of family matters altogether? Melissa finally pressed the call button, desperate for some clarity. Daniel answered casually, his voice slightly tired. Melissa, can't it wait? It's late. Did you know? She asked abruptly, her voice shaky with emotion. About Dad having another woman, about Mom meeting her? Daniel sighed deeply, silence stretching briefly. Mom finally told you? Melissa froze, her breathing uneven. You knew all along? He hesitated. Not everything, but enough. Mom called me last year after Aunt Carol died. She broke down and told me bits and pieces. Honestly, I told her to keep it to herself. Melissa's pulse quickened, a fresh wave of anger rising. You told her to lie to me? I didn't tell her to lie, Daniel defended calmly, irritation edging his voice. But I knew you'd make it a big deal. Look at you now. You're already tearing yourself up. Melissa clenched her fists, frustrated by her brother's detachment. It's not right. Dad might have had another child. This woman, our half-sister, she's out there somewhere. And Mom risked destroying our trust just to hide it. Aren't you even curious? Daniel sighed deeply, sounding distant. Melissa, what good would knowing do? Dad is gone. Digging up dirt from his past won't bring him back. Mom made her choices. Maybe it's best to leave it alone. Melissa shook her head, frustrated tears forming. How can you say that? Mom's lying is not just a mistake. It changes how I see everything. Daniel paused, his voice softening. Look, I'm sorry you're hurting, but sometimes not knowing is better. Let it go. Melissa hung up abruptly, tears stinging her eyes. She felt deeply betrayed, not only by her mother's lies, but by Daniel's complicity in the secrecy. Suddenly she felt profoundly alone. The sense of family that had anchored her life now felt fragile, based on half-truths and silence. Determined to understand, Melissa began to research, desperate for answers Karen hadn't fully shared. She searched through old family photo albums and documents Karen kept stored away, seeking clues. Hours passed before Melissa came across a faded envelope hidden among her father's papers. Her heart racing, she carefully opened it. Inside, there was a handwritten letter dated more than 3 decades earlier. Melissa recognized her father's handwriting immediately, her breath hitching as she began to read. My dearest Carol, I've made a terrible mistake. I don't know how to explain this to Karen. There is a child, a daughter named Angela, and her mother insists she is mine. I never intended to hurt anyone. I'm begging you to help me. I can't face this alone. Melissa lowered the letter, her vision blurred by tears. Her father's fear and desperation were evident, and his plea to Aunt Carol felt desperate. This discovery left Melissa with even deeper confusion. Did Karen already suspect back then? How much had she chosen to overlook to keep their family intact? Melissa's heart hardened with a quiet determination. If her mother wouldn't give her the full truth, perhaps Angela could. Melissa knew she had to find this woman who had shaken her family's foundations. Her half-sister, Angela. Meanwhile, Karen, alone in her bedroom, stared at a photo of her late husband, tears streaming silently. She knew revealing part of the truth was necessary, but she feared the entire story would push Melissa away forever. The guilt consumed her, yet she was not ready to face the full depth of the secrets she still concealed. Melissa spent several sleepless nights meticulously tracing Angela's trail online, piecing together clues from the information her mother reluctantly shared. Her determination only grew as questions multiplied. Who was Angela now? Was she anything like Melissa, or completely different? A stranger, bound by hidden family threads? After days of searching, Melissa finally found Angela's social media profile. Staring at Angela's photograph sent chills down Melissa's spine. The resemblance to their late father was undeniable. Heart-pounding, Melissa typed a careful message, rewording it repeatedly, afraid of rejection or silence. When Melissa finally hit send, her anxiety soared. Minutes felt like hours until the response came. Friendly, yet cautious. Melissa, I've been hoping you'd reach out. I'd love to talk. They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe, neutral ground for a conversation long overdue. Angela arrived early, visibly nervous, smiling warmly when she recognized Melissa. The sisters hugged awkwardly, uncertain but hopeful. Over coffee, their conversation flowed cautiously at first, but soon, years of pent-up curiosity surfaced. Angela revealed she'd known about Melissa and Daniel her entire life, always feeling like an outsider, observing from afar. Melissa felt conflicted hearing Angela describe loneliness and rejection, emotions she herself now intimately understood. Meanwhile, Karen learned through Daniel about Melissa's intentions. Fear seized her, realizing her secrets were unraveling faster than she'd anticipated. She confronted Daniel, her voice shaking with anxiety. Why did you tell her? You promised me we'd handle this quietly. Daniel met his mother's gaze firmly. Mom, Melissa deserved the truth. I kept quiet because I thought it protected her. But clearly, that was a mistake. Keeping secrets only deepens wounds. Karen stood silently, devastated by the realization that Daniel had turned against the secrecy they'd maintained together. She felt more alone than ever, trapped by her own choices, terrified of what Melissa might learn from Angela next. Melissa's conversations with Angela deepened quickly. Each revelation Angela shared peeled back another painful layer, forcing Melissa to question everything she once believed. Angela confessed she had tried repeatedly to contact their father before his passing, only to be rebuffed by Karen, who insisted he was unaware of Angela's existence, a detail that sharply contradicted the letter Melissa had found. "Mom lied to you," Melissa said quietly, guilt gnawing at her conscience. Angela nodded gently, sadness shading her eyes. "I think she lied to protect herself. She was scared I'd destroy your family." Melissa struggled internally, torn between loyalty to her mother and empathy for Angela. Returning home later, she confronted Karen, anger and sorrow heavy in her voice. "Angela told me everything. Why would you deny her a chance to know Dad? To know us?" Karen, pale and trembling, sank onto the couch. "Melissa, you don't understand. Angela's mother threatened me. She wanted money and threatened to ruin us if I didn't cooperate." Melissa froze, stunned by this new revelation. "You paid her off." "Only once," Karen admitted tearfully. "But then your father got sick. Everything spiraled out of control, and when he passed, I thought the secret died with him. I was desperate to protect you both." In another room, Daniel listened silently, heart heavy. His mother's desperation shocked him. Her secrecy, once understandable, now felt poisonous. Daniel knew he could no longer stand passively aside as their family fractured further. Something had to change. Meanwhile, Melissa's heart sank, realizing their family's painful past was far darker and more complicated than she imagined. Angela, though innocent, represented truths Karen had tried desperately to erase, truths that now threatened to shatter their family forever. After days of tense silence, Daniel called Melissa, insisting they meet. When they sat down, he spoke gently but firmly. "Melissa, this can't go on. Mom's terrified, and Angela's been hurt enough. We need to find a way forward together." Melissa shook her head slowly, her eyes full of sadness. "It's not that simple. Angela grew up rejected, and Mom knew it all along. How can we trust her again?" Daniel sighed deeply, regret etched across his face. "Mom wasn't right, but she believed she was protecting us. I encouraged her silence. I'm just as responsible. Angela deserves better, and so do you." His sincere remorse surprised Melissa. Daniel had always avoided emotional conflicts, yet now he stepped forward decisively. "We should all sit down. Mom, Angela, us. We need every secret out in the open, otherwise it'll destroy us completely." Melissa hesitated, fearful, but knowing he was right. Eventually, she nodded in agreement. Daniel arranged the meeting cautiously, reassuring Karen she wasn't alone, convincing Angela she'd finally get the truth she deserved. Anxiety surged as everyone gathered at Karen's house, each carrying their own heavy burdens. The air felt thick, charged with years of unspoken pain. Karen spoke first, her voice fragile. "Angela, I'm sorry. Your mother's threats frightened me. I believed paying her off was the only way to protect my family. It was wrong. I robbed you of your father, your siblings, everything." Angela listened silently, tears streaming down her face, emotions swirling between anger and forgiveness. Melissa's chest tightened painfully as the raw sincerity in Karen's voice moved her deeply. But as truths emerged, an even darker revelation lingered unspoken in Karen's eyes, one she still feared revealing. The room remained silent after Karen's confession, each word still echoing heavily. Angela's voice finally broke through, quiet yet forceful. "I understand your fear, but you denied me a family. Money never replaced love. Did you even try to know me?" Karen's face crumbled under the weight of guilt. She hesitated, her voice barely audible. "Angela, I did more than pay your mother. I threatened her too. I was desperate. When she kept demanding more money, I warned I'd expose her past, her addictions, the neglect. I knew social services would step in, maybe take you away. It was a bluff, but it worked. She stopped contacting us. Angela's face drained of color. Melissa stared at her mother, horrified, heartbreaking for Angela. Daniel stepped forward, protectively, his voice steady but firm. Mom, why didn't you tell us the whole truth sooner? Karen shook, her gaze lowered, voice breaking completely. Because I became someone I despised. I couldn't bear for you to see me that way. I was ashamed of myself. So ashamed that I buried it, convinced it never happened. Melissa's heart twisted painfully. She felt torn between compassion for her mother's agony and shock over how far she'd gone. Angela, tears streaming silently, rose abruptly, overwhelmed. I can't. I need time. Melissa stood to comfort her, but Angela pulled away gently, shaking her head. I don't blame you, Melissa, but your mother destroyed the one chance I had at family. Angela left quietly, leaving the others in stunned silence. Daniel put his arm around Karen, comforting her despite everything. Melissa stood frozen, torn apart by the pain that engulfed her family, uncertain if forgiveness was possible or even deserved. Days passed slowly, each filled with a tense, uncomfortable silence. Melissa avoided Karen, unable to reconcile the mother she'd always admired with the person capable of such cruelty. Her nights were spent replaying the family meeting, haunted by Angela's wounded expression. Deep inside, Melissa knew she had to decide, either forgive her mother or lose her forever. But forgiveness seemed impossible, betrayal still fresh in her heart. Karen remained withdrawn, a shadow of herself. Her once lively eyes were dulled by grief and regret. Each day she considered reaching out to Angela, yet fear of further rejection kept her silent. She had crossed lines she'd sworn never to cross, lines etched deeply into her heart. Could anyone forgive such deeds? Meanwhile, Daniel struggled silently. Feeling guilty for encouraging his mother's secrecy, he began regularly contacting Angela, gently urging her to give Karen a chance. Angela, he pleaded softly over the phone one evening, our mother's deeply flawed, but she isn't a monster. We all deserve another chance. Angela listened patiently, her voice quiet but firm. Daniel, your mother stole my childhood. I can't just forgive and forget. Not now. Maybe never. Realizing Angela's pain ran deeper than he imagined, Daniel began doubting if healing was even possible. Still, determined, he reached out to Melissa next, hoping that together they could mend something broken beyond recognition. But Melissa's response shook him profoundly. I don't know if I even want to forgive her, Melissa whispered coldly. But I do know this. She's still hiding something, and I won't rest until I know everything. Weeks had passed, leaving the family trapped in an uneasy limbo. Melissa avoided Karen, convinced their relationship might never heal. But late one evening, Karen unexpectedly showed up at Melissa's door, pale and trembling. Melissa, please, Karen pleaded softly. I have one last truth to tell you. Then you can judge me forever if you must. Melissa hesitated before letting her mother inside, anxiety gripping her tightly. Karen sat heavily, her face drawn and exhausted. Angela's mother, her name was Gloria. She wasn't just your father's ex. She and I had been friends once, years before either of us met your father. When she learned he had chosen me, she felt betrayed, bitter. When she contacted me demanding money, it wasn't just greed. It was revenge. Melissa listened in shock, her pulse racing. Karen continued quietly, her voice barely audible. Gloria threatened to destroy your father's career. He was so respected, Melissa. The shame alone would have killed him. Melissa stared numbly, her anger fading beneath waves of sorrowful understanding. Why didn't you tell us? Karen's eyes filled with tears. Because I feared losing you both forever. Protecting his memory meant hiding everything else. At that moment, Melissa saw clearly how deeply Karen had been trapped by love and fear. Silence stretched heavily until Melissa's phone buzzed, a text from Angela. I think we need to talk again. Melissa's heart quickened, realizing Angela's wounds were perhaps not as permanent as they had feared.